2007 report, and now it's reiterated in this current report. You raise concerns about the ease with which critical access hospitals could manipulate the Medicare hospital wage index system by converting to a prospective payment system hospital and pull national Medicare dollars into in one state entirely. Since enactment of the Affordable Care Act, this very scenario has occurred and is referred to as the the Bay State boondoggle. Can you give us a sense of this? How real is it? Why it is that you're concerned about it?
Yeah. So in our hospital payment system, we adjust the payments for local wages across the country since there's so much variation. And that's an appropriate thing to do. The problem that we've had, Mr. Roskam, is that over the years, there have been a lot of ad hoc changes in that system for adjusting wages, special rules, special categories created. And what we saw in Massachusetts, the case that you referred to, is one of those special rules being manipulated for the purpose of increasing Medicare payment. We recommended in 2007, as you know, a complete overhaul of the wage index system, including wiping out all of these special rules that are subject to manipulation. Recently, the Institute of Medicine was asked by the Congress to look at the same issue and came up with recommendations quite similar to the ones that we made in 2007. So we need to get away from these special provisions that are sort of rifle shot additions to the law because they are subject to manipulation.
Because this is zero-sum game, right? So when these things are manipulated, and I know that's a characterization, but I'll characterize it as a manipulation. When they are manipulated for the benefit of one at the demise of another hospital or the demise of another state. Is that right?
That's correct. The wage index system is a zero-sum game. It's an index, and it redistributes a fixed amount of dollars.
Let me just shift gears to the rehab side. As we all know, our former colleague and my Senator Kirk, had an incredibly difficult health experience and that he suffered a stroke, but we've all been heartened by the story of his recovery and now his return to the Senate. He gives an incredible amount of credit to an institution in Chicago, the Rehabilitation Institute of Chicago. I have a sister institution out in the suburbs called Marianjoy, and I want to get to this question of the 60% rule and how this is or the 75% rule and the 60% drama. Congressman Hyde, my predecessor, was served in his last days at Marianjoy, and so it's an institution with a lot of it's got a great reputation, but they're under incredible downward pressure. And when I speak to the president of Marianjoy, she said that they evaluated in the previous year more than 7,400 patients, only admitting 2,400 patients, which means that 2 out of 3 were turned away. It's a selective admission process, and their argument is, look, this shows that the system isn't being abused and so forth. Can you speak to this 60% rule and what happens if it moves to 75%? Because there's a number of us that have real concerns if we move in that direction.
Yeah. So in the post-acute portion of Medicare, we have several different types of providers. We have the inpatient rehab facilities. We have long-term care hospitals. We have skilled nursing facilities and home health agencies. And patients requiring services after a hospital admission can end up in any one of those 4 places. And what we see in the data is that patients with the same diagnosis, the same clinical problem, can often wind up in any one of the 4. The challenge is that the payment rates for those 4 different settings are dramatically different.
Right.
And so in the case of inpatient rehab facilities in particular, they are very important institutions for patients with a particular set of needs that really need intensive rehabilitative therapy. But it's an expensive place to send patients who could be cared for just as well in a skilled nursing facility or home health. The cost is much higher in the inpatient rehab facility. And so the 60% rule or the 75% rule is a crude attempt to assure that the inpatient rehab service, an intensive high-cost service, is focused on the patients who really need it and not on patients who could be cared for just as well in a skilled nursing facility. It is an arbitrary rule. It is a crude rule, and it's the sort of rule that you need to impose when you don't have an accountable party, a clinician, making that choice on where to send a patient, coupled with responsibility for cost and quality. So the direction that we want to move is away from these arbitrary rules like the 60% or 75% to systems where a clinical organization would say, this patient with a hip replacement can go to a skilled nursing facility. This patient with a more complicated problem really needs to go to an inpatient rehab facility. And that person is accountable for the cost and quality of care. In a siloed payment system, there's no accountability.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you for raising that issue. The whole challenge on post-acute care and the reimbursement